my children, and welcome to the 10th anniversary of Longbox of the Damned! Oh, thank you so much for watching all these years. It humbles me to know you truly do appreciate terrors of the printed page. For the next 31 days, we shall be revisiting series from the last decade. And what better way to start things off than one whom we visit every year? Junji Ito. From Uzumaki to Frankenstein, we have seen what Junji Ito is capable of. And yet he still finds ways to send shivers up our spines, and consequently have our spines detach and walk away, leaving the person a still living bag of flesh. And what's great is you can't tell if that premise really is a Junji Ito story or not. We start with Billions Alone, about the introverted Michio observing news of a bizarre serial killer who saws people together. He's invited to his class reunion and recalls a friend of his from back then, Horie, who used to stand up for him to bullies. The killer is able to hijack radio broadcasts and drop flyers advertising people to join the Billions Alone Club, to come together, reach out and join hands. And skin. Michio observes as more and more elaborate incidents occur. People on a group date all joined into one. The news reporting on missing groups of people found days later all sewn together. And it's happening all over the country. Michio warns Horie that perhaps they should cancel the reunion, since the killer is not to strike anywhere there are groups of people, but she reassures him it'll be fine. Besides, he can act as a memorial for their friends who have been killed. But it only gets worse. The radio playing requests for songs like Come Together, and flyers being dropped from the sky by a group called Billions Alone, encouraging people to get closer. The reunion happens, but a delay with the police causes Michio and Horie to not enter at the same time as everyone else. And the entire reunion has vanished, reappearing days later as dozens are all found sewn together. Soon, people have stopped leaving their homes, stopped gathering with others, not even risking being in the same room as their own loved ones. When Michio finally decides to visit a lonely Horie, he sees the military attacking the planes, dropping the flyers, and thinks it's a good sign. Until he comes across Horie sewing people together. That is an incredibly creepy story that makes absolutely no sense. How is she doing this? How did she overpower so many people without any struggle? How did she get the entire reunion captured while being outside with Michio? How did she arrange the flyers? Or is she not responsible and she was just driven insane? And for a lot of Junji Ito stories, having no solid answers is fine, but either her being behind it or just being driven insane like this is not really a satisfying conclusion. But fortunately, we have something a little more plausible, and just as horrifying in our next story, The Human Chair. While this is an adaptation like his take on Frankenstein, if you didn't know it was someone else's story, it'd be easy to believe it was a Junji Ito idea, because it fits so well with him. But no, this is by Edogawa Ranpo, who tells a tale within a tale. A writer stops by a furniture shop whose owner explains how important it is to have a good, comfortable chair. Chairs can change your entire life, you know. He tells of the author Yoshiko Tagawa, a popular writer from long ago, married to a government official. One day, a manuscript was delivered to her by someone who wrote a story called The Human Chair, about a furniture salesman who created a large, comfortable chair that he was able to live inside of, give in to his own perversions of having someone laying on the chair and consequently on him. Soon, Tagawa became paranoid about her own large writing chair, becoming convinced that someone was living inside of it. Her suspicions were finally confirmed when her husband sat in the chair and found himself stabbed from the inside. After the police came, they tore open the chair, and while the man was not inside, someone had definitely been living there, surviving on cans of salmon that he would get when exiting the chair at night. Really hope he made sure to use the bathroom when leaving the chair too. The furniture salesman is only too happy to reveal what eventually became of Togawa, finally reciprocating the man's love for her, and both settled into this new chair. And the salesman is only happy to reveal that he is one of their descendants. The writer decides that she is not interested in a chair and flees, only for some time later, a chair to be delivered to her. And the moral of the story is, learn to use standing desks. The next tale is another Edogawa Ranpo adaptation. An Unearthly Love. A woman named Kyoko marries a man named Kodono, who is rumored to be a bit of a woman-hater, but he only ever treats her with respect and love. However, she soon realizes that Kodono keeps sneaking off somewhere in the middle of the night. Suspecting an affair, she follows and observes him go up into a nearby attic and hears him whisper sweet nothings, admitting he cannot make himself love Kyoko, and loves only the person he's with. She investigates, but finds only a doll in a chest. Realizing that he is in love with the doll, she destroys it. But when he finds the destroyed doll, he kills himself to be with her again. Some people just couldn't appreciate unconventional romance in the old days. Now we have sex robots for exactly these occasions. We move on to the story the collection is named for, Venus in the Blind Spot. A group of people have formed a club of UFO observers and studiers under the leadership of Asao Shono, a prominent ufologist. Unfortunately, as time went on, the group became more obsessed with Asao's daughter, Mariko, who is definitely more interested in the UFOs. They became obsessed with her beauty, until they discovered they could no longer see her. They could still hear her and touch her, but she completely vanished from their vision. During a meeting where she is introducing them to a new member of their group, they finally admit that they can't see her, pointing out scars on their own heads that they think are proof of alien abduction. They try to approach Mariko in their panic to see her, but Asao finally orders them all to leave and never return. After getting the new member to pass out from alcohol, however, we learn the truth. Asao believes that UFOs are just an illusion the brain makes up. So, using that principle, he was the one who abducted the members and implanted them with a device that created a blind spot in their vision so they could not see Mariko. And now he plans to take it a step further, make it so the disgusting worms cannot hear his daughter. However, after dropping off the new member, he returns to the house to discover his housekeeper dead, and the group all dragging Mariko away, convinced that she is some kind of alien, and their lustful obsession has gone too far now. They knock the new member out, and she is later discovered dead, the truth of it all revealed. Except for the new member, since the procedure was never fully completed, can still see a kaleidoscope of Mariko in his vision from time to time. Not the best story, probably not the one that should have gotten the collection title, but it does have 2 moments of color inserted in, which definitely makes it a unique sort of tale. But it's not the only story with color though, for we have our next story, The Licking Woman, which includes a few pages to start with more than black and white. A strange woman has been going around the city of X. You know, that famous Japanese city X! It was founded by people who thought buried treasure was there. Anyway, a strange woman has been going around licking people at random. But as we see with Miku's poor boyfriend who got licked by her, and consequently her dog who licked the same spot on the boyfriend, there's something in the woman's saliva that kills people unless you immediately wash it off. The poor boyfriend and puppy are killed as more victims pile up. Miku joins a neighborhood watch group that hunts for the licking woman. And despite getting licked herself, Miku is able to tackle her and finally get her captured, revealing her massive, diseased-looking tongue. Miku is healed of the injuries from the tongue, but she, like the other victims, still develops psychological issues from it. Bizarrely, nothing odd about the licking woman can be found. Some years later, Miku is talking with a woman at a bar who claims to have also been a victim of the licking woman, and reveals that the licking woman is finally getting released from prison, apparently having undergone therapy and treatment. Miku and the other woman agree to try to kill the licking woman if she begins her attacks again, Miku putting some cyanide on her skin before the attack starts, so that the woman will lick it and kill herself in the process. And indeed, that's what happens. But the licking woman, as she's dying from the cyanide, rips out her own tongue, and said tongue keeps moving around, even trying to get into Miku's mouth. Aren't you glad I'm starting the 10th anniversary with something really gross? She gets away, but the tongue is not found. Later, Miku starts dating a boy, but when she moves in to kiss him, a giant tongue emerges from her mouth and into the boy's mouth. Both die as the massive tongue creature wriggles away to do whatever disembodied tongues do. The next section, Master Umez and Me, is actually an autobiographical tale about Junji Ito's admiration for manga artist Kazuo Umez. And while we of course are only too happy to honor horror creators and see said creators showing their own influences and passion for others, it's probably best to stick to the actual horror tales. Like this next one, another adaptation. This time it's How Love Came to Professor Corrida, originally Professor Gildea, by Robert Hitchens. It features a framing story of the same writer in the shop from The Human Chair, having apparently survived that whole incident none the worse for wear. Good for her! Only now she has discovered a journal by Sumiko Hayama, an ancestor of hers, and it is titled The Diary of a Parrot Woman. Now, how come the story wasn't called that? Anyway, it tells of Engai Corrida, a misanthropic author in the Meiji era. The journal is a record of the events leading to his mysterious death. Corrida had summoned Father Murchison, a Christian minister, to try to learn about Christianity for an upcoming book he was writing. He found the idea that Christianity was about love to be absurd. Corrida hated love, hated the idea of people loving him, wanted the world to be filled with sublime beauty, without affection, be it emotional or physical love. As someone who loves many things, horror stories, skeletons, eating human flesh and blood, I've got to strongly disagree on this. He also owns a parrot that not only mimics voices, but studies a subject before repeating words, wanting to get things down perfectly first. It repeats words Kirida spoke recently, berating the work of the young woman who wrote the journal, Hayama. He dislikes it and her, personally, for the passion she seems to have in her work. Oh no, what a terrible thing to have passion in your work. How is this guy a prolific and popular writer? Is he mostly known for the tax code? Murchison speaks with Hayama, recognizing that she seems to have love and affection for Kirida, despite the fact that he's an asshole. Murchison encourages her affections though, hoping that it might shake loose his misanthropy. After this though, he feels a strange gust of warm air on him. Anyway, her efforts have the opposite effect, making him hate her even more and be especially cruel, to the point where she seemed to attempt suicide. Soon, Kirida seems to think that something is quite literally haunting him. He wants the father to try to exorcise it, but he's not sure he can. Later, Kirida is convinced that what haunts him is the spirit of Hayama, slipped out of her body after the suicide attempt. Kirida tries to explain himself to Murchison, that he is simply a hateful person in general, and the unwanted affections of someone is disgusting for him. However, the good father does understand that he had a woman in his parish years ago who became obsessed with him, tried to force him to love her, but he could not. And indeed, there is a spirit haunting Kirida as it makes himself known, but the parrot's mimicking voice is not of Hayama, but the woman who is stalking Murchison. Indeed, she admits that her efforts here are to try to make Murchison jealous, and that she interpreted his kindness to Hayama as an affair. And then the story just kind of stops. The stress of it all killed Kirida, and Murchison told all this to Hayama, who wrote it in the journal, and the writer senses a hot wind after finishing the journal. This collection is full of disappointments and weird non-endings. Is there nothing classic in this? Something truly horrifying? Or must I find a hole somewhere to crawl into and die all over again? Of course, my children, we come to what may be Junji Ito's most popular and well-known short story, The Enigma of Amigara Fault. After an earthquake, a fault opens up in Amigara Mountain, revealing a wall of holes, shaped like human beings. I think the mountain has missed the point of the game Operation. People feel compelled to go to the holes, and we follow two in particular, Owaki and Yoshida. The holes are being studied, of course. It's a mystery how such things could have formed. Certainly not naturally, especially since the holes extend deep into the mountain and curve off. But then there's the compulsion of the holes. Yoshida says that when she saw the TV report on the holes, She saw it, the thing that made her come. There was a hole in her shape. This is in spite of the holes being thousands of years old, and another person there confirms that's why he came as well. He's found his hole, and to prove that it's in his shape, he strips off his clothes and steps into it, moving deeper in. Of course, no one can pursue him. Owaki has a nightmare of the man in the hole, trapped in pitch darkness hundreds of meters in, that the earthquake deformed the hole, and thus he can't move and is stuck, pleading for help. So yeah, important safety tip, bring a flashlight into your hole with you. Yoshida, meanwhile, has found her hole, and she's terrified of it, feeling the need to go inside, but knowing that if she does, she may end up trapped. Others are not so quick to resist as a man climbs into his hole. It is his hole. It was made for him, after all. Yes, but did you ever pay for the commission, or did you just say it was made for exposure? Yoshida continues panicking as others enter their holes, Owaki plugging up her hole with rocks to try to help. Owaki tries to comfort her that night, explaining that compulsion may just be a result of her loneliness in her past. It seems to calm her, but that night he has another nightmare, this time of caveman times, where the holes were a punishment for criminals dug by the other people in the tribe, and the criminals forced in. What's worse, the holes twisted and changed shape, slowly altering the physical bodies of those who went in, stretching them in obscene ways as they kept being forced forwards. When he awakens, he sadly discovers that Yoshida has cleared away the rocks and gone into her hole. And then he discovers his own hole. He strips off his clothes and enters. Meanwhile, the researchers discover the other side of the fault, where there are also holes, but they are not in any way human-shaped. And when they peer inside, they see something very much not human coming out of them. Honestly, the collection probably should have been named after the tale of Amigara Fault. It's a better story, it's the most famous of his short stories, parodied and homaged in other works. It's just peak Ito. The same cannot be said of the next one, The Sad Tale of the Principal Post. A family has just finished construction of their new house. However, they soon hear the cries of their father, who went into a crawl space under the house and... somehow, he just says it's a long story, he got pinned underneath the principal post of the house. He refuses help, since if anything happens to the principal post, it would mean their new house would fall over. So, he just says to leave him there and let him die. Which he does. And the narration says no one ever figured out how he got there. Why was this one in color? The tale of the principal post is another somewhat famous one, but it's also a dumb one, since I have to imagine carpenters and rescue workers would know how to get him out without letting the house fall over. Anyway, let's end on a better note with Keepsake. The Lord Tomokichi is brought out to the family cemetery. Inside of the grave of his late wife is a baby! Indeed, it's still attached to the corpse by an umbilical cord. Somehow it survived and gestated during all that time. Since then, Tomokichi married his mistress and had a child with her, but his father insists that for the sake of appearances in their family, they must keep the new baby as well. The mistress demands that their maid care for the child, that she won't raise the baby of a dead body. And within a few years, the child has grown up to be nice and creepy, and hated by the mistress, who ties him to a tree. The maid tries to free him, but the mistress says that the maid is too soft on the child, that he needs more discipline. As such, she ties up the maid and begins torturing her too, until Tomokichi comes in. We learn that Tomokichi's original wife actually knew full well the affair, and that the mistress was pregnant, and she was only too happy with the arrangement. She could not bear children herself, and they could take the mistress's baby as their own. However, the mistress refused to hand it over, instead encouraging Tomokichi to murder the wife with a slow poison. It succeeded, yet somehow she still had a baby. When the mistress demands to know why he would sleep with a dying woman, the maid says that she knows the truth, that he did not sleep with a dying woman. He slept with her corpse. Yes, according to Tomokichi, her dead body turned to him and asked to make love, and he acquiesced, resulting in the keepsake baby. This revelation drives the mistress mad, and apparently to her death, Tomokichi marrying the maid now instead. Although we also see that from the grave of the mistress, the sounds of a wailing child can be heard. A much better story to end on, my children, and a great way to start things off. So begins the 10th anniversary, with a corpse and a birth. So, you want to know about Moarte, eh? You've heard about him, the ghoul who likes to talk about horror stories in comic books. But now, after 10 years, you want to know his story. Well, the problem is, no one is quite certain how it went down. There are several different versions of it. Would you like to hear them? Let's begin with the tale of the comic store employee. Once upon a time, there was a man who worked at a local comic store. This was during the speculator boom, when comic stores were popping up all over the place, and the owner of this store thought he had found a quick way to riches with his little shop. But then, the speculator bubble burst, and his store was losing money every day. But the owner was stubborn, and didn't know when to quit. He kept seeing the potential of comics for money only, trying his best to get his hands on rare, exotic, different sorts of comics. Anything that might get a speculator or a rich fan with far more money than sense into the store. Or it was just very inappropriate material, the stuff that drove away the casual fans. But in his searches for rare but cheap comics, he came across a very different sort of book. When he put it into a long box for storage, it warped the box, and every other comic inside of it, and it eventually warped him. Whatever this strange comic was, it was dark, it was evil, and it had a hold of him. He was cursed, forever forced to tell people who came in about dark comics, horror comics, no matter what they wanted. And when his store finally closed, he took it on the road to try to make people buy terrifying comics wherever he could. And now he's found the easiest way to tell people about them. YouTube videos. Just like the one you're watching now.